Good evening, Bill Wadman.
Good afternoon, Sandy Robertson.
And how are you on this sultry summer's evening slash day?
I think it should be "How art thou?" But uh, I'm hot. Well, I'm not hot in here, but I was hot when I was like walking around a lot.
That's the funniest thing we've ever done on camera.
Yeah.
Remember, you said to me, I said I'm hot, and you said you are, or something. It was very funny.
Well, we're comedians now,
Well,
not just commentators.
speak for yourself. Deeds, not words. Speak for
How do you
yourself.
how do you feel about deeds, not words?
Well, the reason why I've been thinking about it is because I've been reading about suffragettes. This is their motto, deeds not words, and born out of sheer frustration that their campaign was essentially going unnoticed.
Okay.
Um, they promoted acts of vandalism and disorder, public disorder,
Mhm.
so that they could become visible.
Yep.
And I've just been thinking a lot about my, I guess, my position in a political landscape where I have just been to vote recently in our general election here in the UK, where I speak to a lot of people who have quite extreme political views, actually.
Hmm.
And the frustration felt in this country prior to the election was kind of driving people to behave in different ways. But I wondered, when do we get to a point where we actually make an action, where we are in action about or against something, rather than just using rhetoric, rather than just speaking?
And maybe throw in there also, when things can go too far. The Italian anarchists were blowing people up in the early 20th century. It's like, okay, maybe that's a little too far.
Well, yes. And of course, I'm going to say here, absolutely not in any way inciting people to riot or to rise up or do anything that is.
No riotous incitement happening here.
No, but I really do mean it. I would say that I would say that I'm a pacifist. I would say that I'm a non-violent person. But when I really scrutinize myself and I think, 150 years ago, I wouldn't have been afforded the vote I've just made.
Yeah.
Uh, would I have would I have committed an act? Would I have done something that was beyond just speaking
In order to change society or change your.
in order to change? And then, of course, I start thinking, what are the things that need to change now? And what am I doing about it?
True. What are you willing to put on the line in order for change to happen?
I mean, Bill, really, you and I, though we are culturally different, we are
Say
similar.
that again.
No, but we are similar, I think, in our politics, probably.
Yeah. I think we
Um,
have a general similarity, yes.
right. But that doesn't mean that we can get away with being complacent.
No.
No.
But I mean, there's a lot of situations where there's a lot of things that I disagree with in American stuff where it's like, well, how far am I willing to go? Am I willing to go out and actually fight, physically fight, start a war over my feelings about this?
Right. Well, that's the question, isn't it?
Yep.
When do we
And
stop
when it,
and when do we start acting? What are the
well,
things that are going to trigger you and trip you so that you act, you take action?
at my age, it would probably take a lot, but it's like the older you are, the more you have to lose. Whenever anybody talks about revolution, and we have this super famous giant. How big is this painting? This painting's like
It is a big thing.
15 by 10 feet or something. It's huge, right?
Yeah, you were just
Um,
telling me before we started though that you didn't see it on your trip to Paris because they were restoring it.
Well, to be fair, yes, I didn't see it on my trip to Paris. My more specifically, my mother didn't get to see it on her trip to Paris. I've seen it before, so.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, what's also interesting about this painting? I always imagine it being more detailed than it is. Not that it's not detailed, but it's not, you know,
But that, I mean,
photorealistic, really high level of, you know.
yes, but that's a kind of art historical thing that I can come in with now, and I'm sure you know this actually, but because it is classed as one of the key romantic paintings, and romanticism of that period moved it forward
Yeah.
from kind of classical style.
Hmm.
Uh, it enabled painters to to focus on symbolism more than representation. I
I
mean,
know. I just in my head, it's like photographic level, but it's not. It's just interesting.
nonetheless, I mean, it is a very fine depiction
Oh,
of
sure.
movement, of power. I mean, there's
Yep.
Liberty. She's leading the people, Marianne. This is not a painting of the French Revolution of whenever it was 1789. This is later. This is 1830. This is
Yeah.
overthrowing Charles the 10th or whatever he was. Um, and these are the people that rise up. Now, it's here because it is the obvious painting to put for deeds, not words. People actually marching, people shooting, people trampling. Uh, when we actually see this in real life, how do we react to it?
I think we would act with horror.
Right.
At least I would. Um, it's interesting. I'm listening to a you know 10-hour series on a podcast called "The Rest Is History" about the French Revolution right now. Like I was
Yeah.
listening to it a couple hours ago, and the more you hear about, we've all studied this in school and learned about it, but I don't think I've ever listened to two high-end historians discuss it for 10 hours and get really into the weeds about stuff. It's so interesting. Your Words and Deeds title is also interesting because it's like, what are the words that have been said that cause people to do such crazy deeds?
Fine.
It goes the other direction too, and that's as fascinating to me as whether somebody would actually cross that line in the first place.
I mean, has anyone ever said something to you that has been so profoundly offensive that you've reacted physically?
uh, I have felt a reaction. I have not. Have I ever decked somebody for saying something to me? No. uh, um, but I have recoiled by things people have said to me.
Mm.
You know, um, it.
Because
I've certainly never been like subsumed by rhetoric. You know what I mean? Like in a Third Reich kind of way or something, where it's like I'm with you, crazy person. Uh,
with all due respect, how do you know?
that's true. That's true because not that I don't couldn't be. I just can't imagine I have yet. Although you and I also have not lived in times that, in our opinions, required that kind of reaction yet. You know,
Yet.
I mean, there's a lot of fear in America that like that kind of thing is a potential in the next few years, and that's scary. Um,
I mean, do you
yeah,
think that when you speak, you command action? Do you think
sometimes.
is there something you could say that could make me do something?
Well, the something is, I actually did suggest you do something a couple hours ago, and you did it. So, I guess, you know, to some extent, I could say something that would make you take action. I
Fine.
mean, I guess the question is the level of action is the question.
Well, but
I,
this,
I, I will say that I can do that much more on a one-on-one basis than I think I can in a group. I don't think I could tell a group what to do, but there's plenty of people that I've talked to who have, taken my wisdom and acted on it.
what I'm curious about is that, I'm actually looking at what drives action at all.
Sure.
Like, What drives action?
Emotion.
I know, but they'll go into that slower. Emotion, but where is, like, how do we locate this emotion? We usually speak of it,
Yeah,
right? So your point that what, the many words that have been said that have led to this action,
sure.
words and action, they're not the same, or are they? Are they equally as potent, or does one have greater gravity than the other?
I mean,
And
I don't think that the French Revolution or, Nazism either would have happened without people whipping up crowds, you know? I mean, so I think that to some extent, rhetoric almost kind of comes before action.
right,
It certainly manipulates action. I guess my problem with it is that I think once it starts, action has a mind of its own, like a mob kind of mentality.
even the language,
Ah, Don McCullin.
yeah, but the language used even to describe the or title this photograph, it's
Hmm.
very interesting because the language is contentious.
Well, it's youths attacking soldiers, even though
And
the
also
soldiers are the ones with weapons.
It's Londonderry.
Yeah,
So there's already a weight and a bias in the language that might
sure.
make us react to the photograph. And obviously, depending where you're from, who you are, your religion, um, what side of the divide you fall upon anyway. But I think it's interesting how action and words coexist. We could spend a lot longer talking about the coexistence of language and action. But again, I'm just really curious about, can I actually tell you? Can I tell you what I mean even? Can I tell you? Can I speak to you and make myself clear? Um, you and I speak often and we
Hmm.
have a conversation in which we believe we understand each other. But if I'm asking you to do something, can I really get you to do what I want? Can I really?
Do you think it's that direct? I mean, to me, it seems like inciting people to action usually requires pressing buttons that already exist in the other person.
Sure, but
You know?
think about how loaded our language is all the time. And think about those people who are close to you who push your buttons.
Yeah.
They're not doing that by hitting you over the head or kicking you in the shin.
No. In fact, they're doing things that other people in the room might not even notice.
I mean, the things that I'm showing here are big gestures of violence, of
Sure.
action and movement. They're separated by 150 years, 140 years, but nonetheless, they're both showing, I guess, a kind of similar thing, an uprising of some sort. Again, doesn't matter what side of divide you fall upon. It's an action brought about by layers and layers of language driven anger.
It also, I think, a lot of the language-driven anger. It's like when you hear younger people call for revolution, I always think to my head, I was like, you don't know what you're asking for, because revolution usually does not end well for the initial revolutionaries. You know, um, that 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 these things tend to get out of control. You know, I think we're bad at measuring our own actions and the actions of others, and keeping things. I don't know. Keeping things in check. Things tend to escalate. It's like the fear of nuclear Armageddon and all this kind of stuff. It's like it starts with one little thing, and then all of a sudden, 45 minutes later, we're all dead. By decisions that all seem rational in the middle.
What is our activism, though, Bill?
Activism scares me.
Shouldn't we be activists?
Yeah. The problem I have with activism is that it tends to assume that things are less connected than I think I believe they are. You know, I'm sort of a everything's interconnected. You can't turn this one knob without it affecting every one of the other knobs.
So is there a way though of me coming along and telling you something and making myself completely clear to you such that you act for me?
No, I don't think so.
Is there something I can show you that could make you understand me?
I think you can push me in a direction, but you can't tell me how far to go or what I'm going to find when I get there.
Hmm.
That looks like fun.
What bold statements do we make to get ourselves noticed? And actually, are our bold statements located where we expect? Now, this is possibly the first piece of Western contemporary art that graphically depicts menstruation.
Okay.
1971, made at the same time as this photograph.
Sure.
Judy Chicago was in her first phase of feminism. That's that period between like 1970 and 1974. She's right in the thick of that. Here she
Yep.
is. This to me could be an activistic image, right? Of course,
Sure.
it's a feminist image,
Sure.
but is it showing what it needs to everybody? In that, I guess what I'm saying is that sometimes I wonder if we have to be primed already to get the activism.
Yeah. Well, this is, meant to be shocking, right? Like and B, how you take it, how I take it, how a man in 1971 would have taken it. Your average man on the street or your average woman on the street in 1971 are all very different potentially, right? Do you think you can control that? You think she could have controlled that?
Well, I mean, this also comes off the back of looking at the Courbet painting last time and thinking about the activism that goes with it. This image is is actually banal,
Mm-hmm.
or rather, the action is banal.
Yes, but it's
The
also an action that is banal and yet generally unseen in Western culture. Of course, this is happening literally millions of times a day all over America and Britain.
Yeah,
But like it's one of these things that has generally been considered, well, yes, we know that happens. We don't need to see that in the same way that we don't need to see somebody using the toilet or, you know, brushing their teeth or whatever, right? Like, that these are necessary things that are generally not shown. So somebody showing it, is it just the effect of like, okay, this is a normal thing and we should normalize it? I think that sometimes people are expecting or are looking for the blowback in order to make a point, which is also an interesting thing. It's just like, I'm not trying to get somebody to act in concert with me. I'm trying to get somebody to act against me.
but what is the action? Like the earlier question is what drives action. Now
Yeah.
the question is what is action? What is the action that happens from this? That you're saying perhaps there's a normalization of menstruation in a Western culture that is apparently so incredibly open that it can't bear to see a tampon.
Of course.
right?
Right. But I could also see a bunch of men being like, that's disgusting, and then we need to take this down, and who's giving this woman money, and blah, 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 like all that kind of, 70s, 80s EP, what's it called? NEA nonsense, um, that kind of conservative stuff. You're almost looking to have that fight, right?
So out of all art activism comes some kind of fight, would you say? Or that the artist
I,
is preparing for a fight with the world?
I think that if you gave somebody truth serum who was making art of that ilk, they would admit that they were kind of looking for the fight. Yeah.
Right. But that's the point, yes?
Yeah.
And that point couldn't be made by other means.
Talking about it.
Hmm.
People have tried to talk and it doesn't work. So sometimes you need action in order to get people to respond to action with action. Is art about these things any different than somebody talking about these things?
Well,
Is art action?
Is art action? There we go. Is art action? By being artists, are we activists? Are all artists activists? And
Maybe.
are all images equivalent to words? Because the reason why I put this on the screen at the end is because the thing that I really want to get to, obviously, is the stuff in bold. The word is never the thing. The word wife is never the person. The word door is not the door. The word prevents the actual perception of the thing or person because the word has many associations, right?
Yeah, language is flawed.
Right. But if that's the case, then does that mean that action is actual perception?
Sure, but it also means that if art is action, then words are action, then there is no difference between words and action.
Okay, we change it then and we go to just representation.
Yeah. But aren't words representation? Aren't all of these things representations?
Sure. So can we, how the hell do we communicate with each other?
Well, I mean, that's all of these things are imperfect communication mechanisms, right? I mean, that's just the classic idea. I guess, I mean, if you want to go down that route, then, our perceptions of reality and me talking to you, even if you're sitting in front of me in person, it's only the neurons in my brain firing off because photons that hit my retina. Do you actually exist, or are you just in my mind? Because that's the only information I have are my senses talking to me.
I think really what I'm asking though is not, it doesn't require an explanation.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at it with you because to
Yeah.
me it seems that you and I are in the business of using words and pictures as an activism, really. But what I then wonder is the exchange between the activism of the image and then the activism or the action created by that thing, if anything. There's like tiers and layers of action. And
Sure.
again, the question to finish is action perception in a way that the word can't be? And I know what you're saying, a word is an equivalent or there is an equivalency to image.
Sure.
But action, actual perception, do you feel that you use words in the present?
No, I guess for me, I tend to think that words are always in the past. But then again, I'm a photographer. Everything I've ever done is in the past.
Sure. I mean, anything that we have done.
But I think that, if you are charging over a pile of people in order to fire on the enemy in a revolution,
Yeah.
You are far more in the now than anything we're talking about.
Right. So action, action. I am, this is active or is this dead? Is this active or is this dead? Is this active or is this dead? Is the word the thing? Is the image the thing? No, but the
Right.
action.
Right. Yeah. And because in 1830 photography did not yet exist or just was invented, like we don't this is the best record we have of this, right? Is Don's picture of the kid in 1971 or 72, is that different because it's a representation of reality in a way that a painting is not? Is that one step closer?
But I suppose I'm also thinking of, again, relationships between an artist, an outcome, painting, whatever,
Yeah.
photograph, but then that relationship extending to the audience, the viewer. I wonder about action. Is like live. It's perception is dead when it's association, but
Yeah.
action can still be born out of perception. Or
You're saying action is in the present.
well, I'm trying to get at it.
Yeah. I mean, that's a tangle of not contradictions, but a tangle of ideas there that can be teased out different ways. But I get what you're saying. I, that's a tough one. Are we, by discussing these things, active?
No, our discussion is dead, but we are active.
Yeah.
So my perception is action, and action is alive.
I think that kid needs to put those guns down. He's far too young to be holding guns like that.
Apparently, Victor Hugo based Gavroche on him.
Well, kids these days.
Bill,
Yeah.
honestly, what could someone say to you to get you to do something?
Do you have an answer for that question?
Please.
Yeah. Uh, they could say, "What's your bank account number?" And I'll do anything you want.
Well, and with that, good night.